She tried to ruin my wedding, but I got the sweetest revenge. I've always felt like I was living in the shadow of my sister, Emma. We're only 5 years apart, but it might as well have been 5 decades based on how differently we were treated by our parents. From the very start, Emma was the golden child, the one they adored and catered to. When it came to birthday cakes, they always had to be her favorite flavor, even though I hated it. Their idea of showing love was through food, and it was always more for her than for me. Even simple things like shopping or picking a place to go would be based on what Emma wanted. It didn't matter if it was supposed to be about me, they always found a way to make it about her. But the favoritism wasn't just about things, it went deeper than that. Whenever we got into trouble, Emma could do no wrong. If she made an accusation about me, even with undeniable proof that she was lying, my parents would always believe her. But if I said anything about her, even if I was telling the truth, I was scolded for causing trouble. It felt like I was invisible, or worse, a nuisance in my own family. Emma, being the spoiled and entitled person she was, made sure to make my life even more miserable. It started with the little things. She would ignore me at first, but then, as we grew older, her behavior worsened. When she reached her teenage years, she became meaner, using her lack of friends as an excuse to take out all her frustration on me. She would bully me, accuse me of things I didn't do, and my parents never cared. Instead of sticking up for me, they would scold me for not being more like Emma, who always seemed to get everything she wanted. The verbal abuse from Emma escalated until it felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells around her, trying not to provoke her. No one could see the way she treated me, or maybe they just didn't care. I was expected to accept it because family is family. But I never received the same consideration in return. It was always Emma's needs first, and my feelings didn't even make the list. The pain of feeling like I was always second best was something I had to swallow every single day, and it's a wound that never quite healed. The years went by, and my resentment towards Emma grew deeper. I tried my best to keep my head down, to live my life without drawing attention to the unfair treatment I was receiving, but it seemed like Emma's behavior only escalated with time. She began to feel more entitled, especially after she entered high school. At first, her bullying was subtle, just little remarks here and there, but as the years went on, it became more direct and cruel. She would criticize my clothes, my friends, my choices, and no matter what I did, it was never good enough. If I tried to stand up for myself, my parents would brush it off, saying I was being too sensitive. I tried to make sense of it all, but every time I thought things were improving, Emma found a new way to make my life a living hell. The turning point came when I started dating. It was my first serious relationship, and of course, Emma couldn't stand it. She started accusing my boyfriend of flirting with her, and when he rejected her, she went straight to our parents, telling them that I was the one causing all the trouble. My boyfriend and I had been friends for a while before we started dating, and I knew without a doubt that he wasn't interested in her. But my parents, as always, sided with Emma, and once again, I was the one left holding the bag. I wasn't allowed to see my boyfriend anymore, and they insisted that I was just too emotional and too dramatic. What made things even worse was that Emma began manipulating our extended family. At family gatherings, she'd put on the act of being the perfect daughter while I was the quiet, difficult one. It wasn't enough that I was already being mistreated at home, she went out of her way to paint me as the villain to everyone else. I started to feel like I had no place in my own family. The worst part? They all believed her. They saw me as the problem, the one who was always making things difficult, while Emma was praised for just existing. And then, the real kicker came, when Emma decided to make amends with me. She suddenly became sweet and helpful, pretending like everything was fine. But I could see through it. It was all a game for her. She had no intentions of being a better sister. She was just trying to manipulate me one last time. That's when I realized I had to take control of my own life. I couldn't let her win anymore. Something inside me snapped, and I knew that if I didn't stand up for myself now, I'd never have a chance to escape the emotional prison she'd built around me. As time passed, Emma's manipulations reached new heights. She had always been good at playing the perfect daughter, and it wasn't just my parents she fooled. The rest of the family believed her too. She had everyone wrapped around her finger. Every family gathering felt like a stage where she performed her role as the golden child while I played the part of the difficult one. The more she manipulated, the more isolated I became. And even though it hurt, I started to accept it. I couldn't change what was happening, but I could control how much it affected me. Or so I thought. It wasn't until my college years that everything started to unravel. I worked hard to get into a good school, determined to escape the toxic environment at home. My parents, of course, didn't want to celebrate my success. They acted like it was no big deal, as if I hadn't just overcome years of being overshadowed by Emma's perfect image. But when it came time for Emma to graduate high school, everything changed. Suddenly, she was the one who was struggling. Her grades weren't great, and she hadn't gotten into a reputable college. My parents still went to bat for her, though, paying for everything while I was expected to figure it out on my own. They told me there was no money for me because they had already invested it all in Emma's future. I swallowed my frustration and worked hard to secure scholarships, knowing that it was my only chance at freedom. That's when I met Jason. He was everything I needed, someone who saw me for who I really was, not the reflection Emma painted of me. He understood the emotional toll my family had taken on me and offered nothing but support. I felt seen for the first time. And, of course, Emma couldn't stand it. She began to interfere in our relationship, making subtle comments that would make me doubt myself. But this time, I wasn't going to let her win. Jason and I kept our relationship private, determined to protect it from the toxicity that Emma was so eager to spread. Then came the day of my engagement. It was supposed to be my moment. But Emma couldn't let me have that. She tried to take the spotlight, as she always did. She arrived at my celebration, dressed in a white dress that she had clearly borrowed from my closet. I could hardly believe it. She looked at me with this smug smile, like she was somehow entitled to be the center of attention at my engagement party. I could feel my blood boiling, but I didn't react right away. I had learned over the years that silence was the best weapon against her. Jason saw what was happening before I did. He grabbed my hand and pulled me away from the scene, knowing I needed to escape. That's when I realized something crucial. I didn't have to let Emma continue controlling my life. It was my turn to take control back. The wedding day was approaching, and I was finally ready to make sure she didn't ruin this one. I knew I had to face her, but it would be on my terms. The day of the wedding arrived, and I was determined not to let Emma take what was rightfully mine. After all these years of being overshadowed, belittled, and manipulated, this was finally my moment. Jason, my soon-to-be husband, had been my rock throughout all of this, always encouraging me to stand up for myself and take charge of the situation. But Emma wasn't going to let me have a peaceful wedding. No, she was going to make sure everyone noticed her, even if it meant ruining my big day. It started early in the morning when she showed up at the venue, dressed in white. I couldn't believe it. She walked in with that signature smirk, acting like she was the bride and that I was the one crashing her show. My heart pounded in my chest, and for a moment, I felt that old rush of frustration bubble up. But this time, I wasn't going to let her get to me. Not today. I had made up my mind, and no matter what, she wouldn't take this from me. Jason, ever the protector, was immediately by my side. He looked at me with determination in his eyes, like he knew exactly what I was thinking. We weren't going to let Emma ruin this day. It wasn't just about me, it was about us, about our life together. We had been through so much, and this was our time to celebrate. But I knew I had to make sure she didn't ruin it for us, and I wasn't going to sit idly by while she tried. When the ceremony began, and everyone took their seats, Emma was nowhere to be seen. I felt a pang of uncertainty, wondering if she had found a way to sabotage things. But when the doors opened, there she was, standing in the back, her eyes locked on me. Her smirk was gone, replaced with a look of pure rage. She was about to try something. I could feel it in my gut. Just as I walked down the aisle, ready to marry the love of my life, I saw my parents talking to security in the back. It was happening. I wasn't going to let her ruin this. Not now. My heart raced as I reached Jason, knowing that whatever Emma tried, we would handle it together. And when the ceremony ended and the drama began to unfold, I realized something: this day wasn't just about revenge. It was about freedom. The freedom to live my life on my own terms, away from Emma's shadow, and to finally, truly be happy. As the night continued, it felt like everything was finally falling into place. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Emma wasn't done yet. I had always known her to be unpredictable, and I wasn't about to let my guard down. The reception had just begun when I saw her sneaking around the back, talking to some of our distant relatives, whispering and giggling with a few guests. I tried to stay calm, but it was hard. Every time I thought she was out of my life, she'd come back with some new plan to ruin things. Jason could see the tension building in me, and his grip on my hand tightened as if to reassure me. We both knew that today wasn't just a celebration, it was our victory. We had fought for this day, for our happiness, for our love. And yet, Emma was still trying to steal the spotlight. I could hear the laughter from the back of the room, and it made my blood boil. Was she trying to make a scene again? Was this another one of her petty games? I decided then and there that I wouldn't let her have any more power over me. I wasn't going to let her ruin this moment, ruin our day. I turned to Jason, who already knew what I was thinking. Without another word, he nodded, and we both headed toward the back. I could feel the eyes on us as we walked through the crowd, but I didn't care. It was time for me to put an end to this once and for all. When we reached the back of the venue, I confronted Emma. She looked at me with a twisted smile, but this time, I wasn't intimidated. "What are you trying to do, Emma?" I asked, my voice steady but full of conviction. She hesitated for a moment, as if unsure of her next move, but I could see it in her eyes. She was calculating. This wasn't going to be easy, but I was done being the victim. I had a life to live, and it was time I started living it without her shadow looming over me. The tension in the air was thick, and the whispers from the crowd grew louder. But Jason was by my side, and that's all that mattered. In that moment, I knew that no matter what happened, I had won. The truth was, I didn't need to fight Emma any longer. I had already beaten her at her own game. And with that, I turned my back on her, walked back to the front, and embraced the life I had fought so hard to build. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think. Have you ever experienced something similar? How would you have handled the situation? Your feedback means the world to us, so don't forget to share your opinions and let's get a conversation going.